Hello, welcome to Discover Dorico for July 2022. I'll check on the chat as always, and thank you for joining if you're joining this session live. And if you're joining later, then I'll add all of the chat to notes underneath so that you can flick through this session to your heart's content and pick up some tips hopefully from this session. First thing, I guess, if you haven't yet updated to Dorico 4.2, then it is now available. So it's highly recommended by the team. So if you haven't updated yet, then please do that. And if you haven't, if you're not using Dorico 4, then there is a summer sale. I think you have about 24 hours left of our summer sale if you want to update to Dorico 4 or if you want to buy Dorico. So recently I attended a session by a company called I Can Compose, Rachel Shapey, and it was about how teachers can get ideas for themselves and also for their classes and students and that kind of thing. And I thought, actually, what we've not really talked about is all of the composition things you can do in Dorico and how flexible it can be for composition. So actually, we should start, I think, by looking at some of those. And here's some ideas, some workflow ideas and that kind of thing if you're doing a composition. And of course, in the Northern Hemisphere, at least, it's holiday season. So if you're on holiday at the moment and maybe you have an idea and you want to write it down, if you have a laptop or your iPad with you with Dorico on it, then maybe this is a good way to kind of capture those ideas and also how you can then take them on from there. So while we do some very nice Dorico pencils, and we also do Dorico notepads, which have manuscript paper in them, really, the idea of this session, really the idea maybe of Dorico is that you don't really need those. This is maybe the first software that's flexible enough to actually do your composition actually straight into the software. So let's have a look at some options that you may have considered, you may not have considered. And also, hopefully this is a session you can direct some other people to, or some students that you have, or some friends that you have to say, you know what, actually, you might want to give this a try. Here's some useful options for you, especially for composition. So I'm going to get started. I'm just have a look at the bottom down here in the comments. So I'll keep an eye on some of these. If it's about this session, then we'll answer some of these as we go. If you're not watching this live and you want to write some comments about things that, some ideas you have for composition or some ways you use Dorico for composition and that kind of thing, then why not stick them in the comments at the bottom underneath this video? Because that'd be very useful. Maybe that will inform us for another session. You can also get in touch at any point, of course, by email on discoverdorico@steinberg.de. So discoverdorico, all one word, at steinberg.de. So let's have a look, quick look for the comments. There are some at the moment. So yes, well, we'll cover a couple of those kind of things, and I'll answer any questions at the end, unless it's the thing I'm just talking about right now. So as I said, the idea is, how do you, when you first start a session, what would you do for composition? Where might you start? Now, of course, Dorico, when it opens, will start you with the Dorico Hub. And actually, there's a couple of things even from here that you might want to, I've got this idea, I just need to get it down quickly. The first thing you might just do is press Create Project. Just be aware, if you do, of course, you're in a solo piano project by default. You may have created your own, and it may be useful to create yourself a useful template of instruments that you would commonly want to start a composition with, so that you can hit that and press go straight from the beginning. But if you've not done that yet, then you're probably on the solo piano project. And just be aware, if you're doing that, of course, that you're by default set to A4 paper size and a specific staff size, and you probably don't care initially. Just be aware in case it comes up later. Also, the project will use multiple flows probably isn't ticked by default, and it isn't ticked for me. So when we look at using multiple flows for things, then those kind of things you'll also need to be aware of, that you won't have flow headings and that kind of thing. So we've got, of course, our music fonts are set here, and the time signature and key signature are set here. So maybe you don't want to start with those on. Maybe you're just starting with a note row or something like that as an idea. Maybe you do want them on, up to you. So we'll press Create Project and look at what would happen if you started from this point on here. So here we have a blank Dorico project with just the piano. Now, if you just want to put some notes in at the beginning, maybe this is where you want to start from, great. Be aware, of course, if you're adding other instruments, you won't have any of the staff labels at the beginning. So if you were to later on say, actually, I would like to add, I'll press Shift P, and if I add a violin, for example, then I can change the order of the instruments. I could even turn off the automatic numbering, so automatic labeling and order. So this is orchestral. So if I right click on that or long press and choose none, then when I change this and add anything else, then it won't change my order. So let's say this is what I want to start with, but of course you still don't have any staff labels. So if you have started this way, And it would be different with some of the other templates, but I know a lot of people have kind of started from this from some of the comments I've seen on social media recently. You want to turn those back on. So if you just go to Library and you go to Layout Options, then for your staves and systems, you just want to turn on your full staff labels and probably your abbreviated staff labels, and just behind my head here, press Apply. Like that, and if you close this dialog, you'll then have your staff labels, so they will be shown here. Of course, if you then go into Galley view, then it might not matter so much because you'll get that little label. But I know some people have started and then gone, oh, why don't I have any labels? So if it's annoying you from the beginning, there you go. Now, if you just want to start from here and say, right, I just want to put some notes in. I've got this idea of a melody. I know what the pitches are, but I maybe don't know what the rhythm is quite exactly yet. Then maybe this is a good place to start. So one place you could start is just by double clicking on the staff, or you can press enter to turn on and off this caret line. Of course, if you've done this before, if the caret line's on, you're entering notes. If the caret line's off, you're editing notes. So now if I just want to put some pitches in, I'm making them up. You might decide you've got a note row. At the session I went to recently, they were given a note row, or the students were given a note row. You might have decided, I mean, in the first image we used for this session, we had a Rubik's Cube. Maybe you're using that as your inspiration. Oh, of course, green would disappear, won't it? Oops. If you're using, something for inspiration or for colours, you mix it up and you want a random element. There was actually was a blog item on the same I Can Compose website where David Beebe, a teacher in the UK, he was looking at it was basically a space type theme, and using a cipher and attaching a word and attaching those to pitches and those kind of things. Whatever method you have, maybe it's random or based on something else. Maybe you've just got a tune in your head that as you've been out on holiday you've thought, oh, actually that's a nice little tune. I ought to write that down. So maybe this is where you start. So you've got the pitches in here. And you might decide, that this is what you want to start with, but you don't know what the rhythm is that you wanted, and you decide that later. So of course now I'm just going to turn up my mixer, press F3, turn up the master here, so you can hear when I choose things. And now you might want to decide, I can play this through. So maybe you want to decide how the rhythms work later. So you may have seen insert mode before. So insert mode in Dorico, if I just turn my caret line on here, then you press I and you get this little light over here. And insert mode can be useful if you want to put a pitch in the middle of something, if you've missed out something, that kind of thing. But it can also be very useful for editing things. So if I turn my caret line off by pressing enter, so now if I choose one or two pitches here, what would normally happen, of course with insert mode off, is you would get note rest, note rest. But if I undo that and turn insert mode on with the letter I, then I can now edit the rhythms of this without changing anything else. So now I can decide, actually, you can also, of course, make other changes to this and tweak things. So if one of the pitches was wrong, you can use Alt, which is your move key, and you can press the up and down arrows to move that. If you're not already aware, you can also use Alt and Shift, and you can move it chromatically. So decide where you want it to be. It's jumping slightly because Dorico's at the 50% mark of the page, so it's kind of like if you get to 50%, it will try and make it match all the way along the system. So you can move things diatonically, you can move things chromatically if you want to. Let's see if we put this into some sort of meter. So let's say we do want to be in 4/4 for now. So now I put this into 4/4. Then you can also use some of these same options. So you can use Alt to move diatonically, but you can also use Alt to move along the rhythm grid. So if I press Alt and the right arrow, then it moves along the rhythm grid. So maybe you've decided, pardon me, that you want to rest at that point or something else, then you can easily do that. Just Alt is your move key. The rhythm grid is what you also see here when your caret line is on, so that these lines across the top is your rhythm grid. So by default, Dorico is set that to quaver or eighth note, and you can change that from down here in the bottom left-hand corner. So you can move notes around very flexibly, no matter how you've entered them first in Dorico. You can also use, so Alt is your move key to move them left and right or to move them up and down, but Alt Shift will extend things. So I can extend this note if I want to. And if I extend if I contract this note, make it smaller, then I get note rest, note rest. If I make it longer, then it would eat some of the next note. If I have insert mode on, then it won't. So it would just push the other notes out of the way. So I can keep doing this, and I can change this note and then play from the beginning. So I can click a note here and I can press P for play. And if I decide I want one of these to be longer, then I can actually just press Shift P and it will replay from the last start position. Sorry, not Shift P, Shift Spacebar, apologies. Shift Spacebar, and it will replay, in this case, from the beginning. And if it's not quite long enough, then I can keep doing that. Shift Spacebar will keep replaying from the same point. It doesn't have to be from the beginning, so if I play from here, and then I want to make a change over here, I'm doing the same changes, and then it will play from that point. So Shift Spacebar can be quite useful for that. And if you do want to play from the beginning and you've got nothing else selected, then Shift Alt Spacebar will play from the beginning. It's a bit too long now. Let's leave it there. So there's lots of things you can do to very flexibly change things that you couldn't easily do with manuscript paper, and obviously you can't hear it, and and that kind of thing either. And actually, in lots of programs, it will be very difficult once you've entered something to change it and decide you want something to be changed later on. And Dorico, you can also do things like if you select notes, you can make them into tuplets later. So if I press my tuplet button, it's also over here in the left-hand menu. You can change things into tuplets later if you want to. If I've got the little 3 for the tuplet selected and I just press delete, then it will delete it and put them back as normal notes if tuplets aren't normal. You know what I mean? You've also got options, of course, like you can select one or more notes and you can press R, so you can repeat it. Then maybe you want to move that up or down to diatonically change that whole section. So again, I can press Shift Alt Spacebar, play from the beginning. And if I just press P, then it will play from the selection. So if I press P, then it will play from the first selected note as well. So there's a whole bunch of different options you can have for playback and that kind of thing. The spacebar will play from wherever the playhead currently is. By default, Dorico has that turned off, but it is available in preferences if you want to turn that on. Sometimes in film music, it's the kind you leave it on all the time because you want to know where you are also in sync with the video and those kind of things. So in the preferences, you can change that should you want to. There's also options for things like dotted rhythms. So if you've got 2 notes, for example, or more selected, and you just press the rhythm dot, then with insert mode on, as it is now, then they'll both become dotted 8th notes. With insert mode off, then they will become a dotted 8th note and a 16th note. So you have options depending on whether insert mode is on or not. And if you've not used insert mode before, it's a really good thing to have a play with initially. Do a little example like this, have a play with it, see what insert mode takes you. And to be honest, if you're not that used to insert mode, it might be an interesting way to make some melodies or make some rhythms and things that way, because you're not quite sure what it's doing. There is a video that my colleague Anthony has done on insert mode, because insert mode, when you right click on it over here, has 4 options. You can be inserting just into the current voice, and we only have one voice, one rhythm on the staff at the moment. You can also be inserting into every voice that player has, so everything for that player. You can be inserting globally, so if you have multiple instruments, you could be inserting time or deleting time from all of the available instruments at that point. And you can also change the length of a bar, basically, with this one. So if I added a quarter note to this bar, it would become a 5/4 bar, and the next one would be a 4/4 bar. So sometimes that's useful for a cadenza, or just because you need an extra beat in that bar. Or not, you can use that version to change it. A couple of people have also said recently they get this red line and they don't know where this red line's come from. That's the stop line. If you're doing something in insert mode, this is the stop line. Nothing else would be affected after it. And I think some people have turned it on by accident because the shortcut is Shift Alt I or Shift Option I, and that turns it on and off. It also sets where that is. So if I choose this note and press that shortcut, it sets where the stop line is. So I think some people have maybe turned that on by accident. And when you have insert mode turned on here it is turned on, I would turn it on, and then Alt I or Option I will toggle round the various modes that you have for insert mode. So just so you know, those options are available. So if you've not used it before, have a watch of Anthony's video on insert mode. I'll link it underneath this one as well, because that covers various other options. But it can be very powerful for composition, just to be able to flexibly change things that you've started, just even when you've started this way. Let me just have a quick check. I think that's okay. Oh, hi, Frank. Frank's in, and he's also answering some questions. Thank you very much, Frank. So this is just one little way, one workflow way of starting if you wanted to. I'm going to go back to setup mode here. And you might want to use flows for various things. One is actually, it came up in the session with the teachers that I went to recently, and they said that their students are very good at going, oh, I don't like that, and deleting it. Oh, I don't like that, and deleting it. And actually, that might be useful. It might not be useful right now. It might be useful later, but don't just delete everything. So one of the things you can do with flows is, maybe I don't like the direction this piece is going, but I might want to keep it for later. And I want to take it in a different direction. So if you right click on the flows down here at the bottom, you can duplicate flow, which means I now have two. I've got this one and I've got this one, and they look identical at the moment, apart from being in slightly different places on that page. And you remember at the beginning I said, because the box for project only uses one flow isn't ticked, I don't have my flow headers. So again, if you go to library and layout options, Command-Shift-L, you can then go in here to say, actually, in the page setup for flows, I would like to show flow headings for all flows. There we go. So now I have flow headings here and here. Another option that you might like if you're doing this kind of composition and you're building up lots of little flows is that you'll notice for the parts, for example, that new flows are allowed on the existing page. So that means in a part you can write flow 1, maybe it's movement 1, and then movement 2 would sit neatly underneath if there was space on the page. We don't normally do that for scores, but you might want it if you're doing this kind of composition idea. So if you do allow an existing page for the score and press apply, then you'll find that you can get both flows on the same page, and that could be a useful option. However, I would also, for composition type things especially, I would say probably use Galley view. So Galley view, if I switch it from here from the view menu, it's also available right down at the bottom. I'm in the way, aren't I? If I just move out of the way, it's available down here too. Or there's a shortcut for it. So Command-Alt-1 and 2. 1 is page and 2 is Galley view. So this gives you one long continuous stream of music. So if I choose this final bar line here, press Shift B and just type a number that fits neatly under your fingers, like 23. Then you get 23 extra bars that you can write music in. So this can be very useful because when you're composing, you're not really worried about where it sits on the page, and scrolling up and down just to get to basically the next bar can be quite annoying. So I recommend Galley view for that kind of thing. So we've done this kind of idea and flows, and if you want to start a new flow or a new idea, you can also use flows for that. So if I go down here in setup mode, you can click on this little button down here, and I can add another new flow. So now I have 3. So we'll go back to right mode, scroll to the end over here. Now we have another little flow. So maybe this wants to be in, again, some sort of time. Shift B, add some bars, and I can start here. Now maybe actually the way I wanted to start this composition is to say, I've got this idea for a melody, but I really know what the rhythm is, and I'm not confident on playing the piano enough to be able to work out the pitches, and I don't want to kind of, to lose it. I just want to quickly get the rhythm down and then work out everything else later on. The easiest way to do that, I think, or one way to do that certainly, is to choose a note from here. Sorry, choose a rest or somewhere where you want to start. Press the record button up here, and that will give you a metronome. And now you can record whatever your rhythm is. It doesn't matter if you've accidentally played more than one note. Just play one pitch and make sure you get the rhythm down. And also, don't worry too much if you then say, oh, actually that doesn't look like it could be the thing I wanted, because actually it may just be that the quantize options aren't quite set how you wanted them. Don't worry, if you select these notes, you can go up to the edit menu, you can go to requantize at any point, and you can requantize things later. So you can say, actually, I only meant this. There's also some other options that we'll use in a minute to kind of look at how some of these kind of things would work. But the important thing here is make sure you get the rhythm down, and then we can look at applying other notes, and the chords and anything else you want to do with it. When you do that, when you're live recording, you might find that your click is a different type of click. So if you want to change it, if you go to the library menu and playback options, then in here you can change your click sound. This is in the click section for metronome. The click sound can be click, beep, or woodblock. I quite like click because it doesn't have a pitch. because if sometimes you've got this idea for something and then you go deep, 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 it doesn't really help you. It's not ever playing in the right key. You can change the pitch, but I just go with click. It's unpitched. It's great. Of course, this is also by default at the moment in whatever tempo this was set to by default, which I'm fine with at the moment. Now, next option I want to look at is in the right menu. There's an option down here for edit duration. And you can do things like lengthen by grid value that we've done before, and lengthen duration. Actually, lengthen duration is pretty good. I don't think we've used this one before. Let's just show you very quickly if I put a note in here. So I've got an 8th note. And one of the options I used before was Shift Alt right arrow, and that moves it along the rhythm grid. But there's also this option then. So that's lengthen duration by grid value. You've then got lengthen duration. What does lengthen duration do? So it tells you what the shortcut is here. So if you press that shortcut and do lengthen duration, it changes an 8th note to a quarter note and then a half note. So what it's doing is changing it to the next value. So if you look on here, of course, the next longest note, and it keeps going up and down. So if you get to a whole note and then press it again, you get a double whole note. If you press it again, you get 4 bars. And if you press it again, you get 8 bars, and then it will halve. So basically, it's halving whatever that note value is. It's pretty smart, actually, that one. Can be quite useful. Anyway, I digress. When you've recorded these notes in, if you use the panel at the bottom here, you've got your properties, of course, and everything else. You've also got here your MIDI key editor. So if I choose some notes here, then it will swing them into view, and I can see these notes. Great. But I can also choose this little button here, and this will show me the length of the notes I recorded. So you can see some of them are shorter, some of them are longer, and I can tweak the length of these notes if I want to. So yes, I can tweak the notated length, but I can also tweak the played length of these notes. So maybe if one of them's slightly off, also don't worry about it. You can tweak it in here if you want to. The quantize was only changing the quantize display, so we've still kept the slight offset, the slight push when I played that note. But we've quantized just the value up here. Now another option you can do is to say, if I go to the right menu and edit duration, I can go to, as well as halve and double, I can do extend to next note. So if I choose these notes and do extend to next note, it just removes all the rests, which can also be a very useful option, just kind of tidy up notation and that kind of thing, if that's what's useful. Now I want to add the chords, add some other notes to this. So maybe I wasn't confident, as I said, playing whatever the chords are. I don't know what they're going to be. So if I turn my caret line on, double click or press enter, but press L, now it will lock the duration. So it will lock all of those rhythms that I've already got, and I can now just play chords on the MIDI keyboard. I don't know, play something random. In fact, let's do the same one. Let's do that. I don't know, I'm just playing stuff. I don't know. I never make anything useful in these sessions, and today is no exception. So now, if I wasn't going to be confident playing this, and it could have been, a melody or anything else, or maybe my MIDI keyboard isn't big enough to play all of the notes I wanted, I can put the rhythms in first, and then I can add the pitches later. So that's lock duration, which can be very useful. What's also useful is in the properties panel down here, where we have our key editor. That's Command 8 or Control 8 to open that with a shortcut. They all have the same MIDI data now, so they all have the same starts or the same offsets, that kind of thing, which can also be quite useful. So that's one way of doing things. Now, maybe you want to spread these out onto some other instruments. So let's go back into setup mode, and let's go to our ensemble option here and type strings, so I can add things like the string section. Now, it might be that you started with the piano and you want to add in other instruments and that kind of thing. So let's say we want to take these notes, and I'll select all of these and I'll copy them, and you could go down to the strings down here, select these 5 staves. You can go to the edit menu, or you can right click actually, and you can just go paste special and explode, and that will take the notes that you had up here and separate them out for multiple instruments. So that can be one potentially useful option. There's some other useful kind of paste type things you might want to do as well. So let's say I was putting some, I don't know, random articulations on some of these. Maybe not that one. Let's do that one there and this. And then let's say we wanted to put a slur on these for some reason. And now if I copy these notes here, copy, and if I select these notes here with Shift, Then when I right click this time, I'm going to use paste special and I'm going to use paste articulations. So that's just going to copy just the articulations. So the notes didn't change, it's just the articulations. And you'll notice I've set myself a shortcut for that one. So there's a few of these things that if you're going to be using them often, you want to set yourself a shortcut for them. So if you go up to the Dorico menu on preferences, or on a PC it's in the edit menu and preferences, then you can go to key commands and you can search for things. So things like I can't spell. I'll just go in here. Paste articulations, you can set yourself a shortcut. It's just one I happen to be using at the time that works for me. Set one that works for you. So things that you're going to use commonly, you might want to do that with. You can also do things like select one or two or more staves. So let's say I'll select these two. So I've used command this time to select two different ones. In fact, I'm also going to select, let's command deselect these ones in the middle so I can have more bars. So I've shift selected this section, not the one in the middle. There's a paste special command for swap. So you can swap things around. So it can be one way of changing voices on things, because I've taken that chord and I've switched a couple of things around when I've given those to those instruments. So there's a few paste type commands for that kind of thing. So we've looked at explode. There is a reduce option as well, does the opposite. There's swap and there's paste articulations. There's also things like move to staff above and move to staff below. So for example, these notes, if I wanted to keep them on the piano, then I can select these notes from here. I can also click and hold and drag a box this way and select notes this way, but I've got some of the extra stems, so I've selected the notes at the end, so I didn't want that one. And I can also choose these notes, and if I go to the edit menu and filter, then I can filter notes in chords. So for example, I could filter out the bottom note, and if I wanted to move that to another staff, then I can use Alt-M for mother, and I can move that to a lower staff. And you can do this for any notes. So if I choose one note, in fact, let's just take one individual note. I'm going to use Alt-Right, move it out, and then I'm going to use Alt-M and move it down, and I can move it down to other staves, and I can move it up to other staves, and I can move it along here. There's also, I've set a shortcut for this, but there's a paste special for not only move to staff above and below, but duplicate to staff above and below. So actually, if you want to put that note back where it was, in fact, no, let's leave it separate, and then press R to repeat it, and then we'll take the copy, and then we'll use duplicate to staff below, and we'll move this one or change this one or put it somewhere else and move this one somewhere else and duplicate that, and this kind of thing. You can obviously play around to your heart's content. You're allowed. I'll allow it. But there are the move and the duplicate commands can be very useful. They can also be very useful because if you've taken a section, let's say this one, and you can alt click somewhere. So I'll alt click at the beginning of this bar. Let's say I'll alt move it along in the bar a bit, so I've displaced it slightly in the bar from where the original one was. If I was to duplicate this to the staff below, then it means that obviously I've got a copy of absolutely everything, but it doesn't matter exactly where it sits on the bar. So it could be that this is partway through a bar, and alt clicking, I might be able to get it in the right place. I might not. No. There we go. But it's sometimes far easier, especially when tuplets are concerned, it's far easier to do a duplicate to staff below with that shortcut. And the other advantage of that is that if you've also got things like dynamics attached to it, so let's say on this section here, we had some dynamics. I've put them in on one staff, I forgot to put them in on the other one. To make sure they're in exactly the same place, use the same duplicate command. And I mentioned this when we were looking at condensing, because it's a very good way to make sure that it's an exact copy of what's above, and therefore the condensing will also work similarly, and you won't get two dynamics accidentally and that kind of thing. So I'm just having a quick look to see what have I missed. That's not too bad on those kind of things. Okay. There's also some things like let's say a little melody of, I don't know, that'll do. I suppose we could have done it. No, I probably should have done. Yeah, I'm going to make it. Yeah, let's make a mess of this because this will be. No, I won't do that way. Yeah, that'll do. So we take a little melody like this, which isn't what we wanted. Yeah, deliberately change just in case. And then we can do things like if you want to add chords to this, but you aren't traveling with a MIDI keyboard. Now, it's really handy to travel with a MIDI keyboard, and obviously, hopefully at your desk you have a MIDI keyboard. If you don't have one, get one. It makes so many things with chords and accidentals and things so much easier. Even if it's a tiny one like this, it's a very thin, fits in your suitcase. Your other half will never know. Really handy thing to take with you somewhere. But if you have a MIDI keyboard, obviously these kind of things are useful. But sometimes you think, you know what, I just want to add some particular intervals to things. So if you press Shift-I for intervals, then you can use our intervals popover. So you can say, for example, things like a third, simple, or a fifth or a seventh or anything else. But you can also in here, you can say things like a minor third, you can say things like a fifth below, you can say what type of seventh you want. You can add other extensions to it, so you can have 14th and I don't know 17, or whatever you want to add. You can add all sorts of things to this. So over the selected notes, then I'll get all of those added as chords as well. So I'm not quite sure what that sounds like. It could be worse. So this also might be then useful to say, now I want to take these and I want to then take some of these chords, all of these chords, explode them to strings or any other instrument. But you can also use the filters. So you can say, for example, notes and chords, and I used the bottom one before, but there's all sorts of options here. So you could say I want to take the fourth note out, and then I want to use the move to staff below for that one and move it to somewhere particular. And I can put it back. And you can go move to staff above as well, it doesn't really matter. So that can be a useful way to split out various bits of chords. And if you're going to be using the filters, definitely set yourself some shortcuts for those, because there are, as you can see, 4 or 5 of them in there, and going in the menu each time to get another one is quite annoying. It's also something that is quite useful on the Stream Deck. So if you have a Stream Deck, mine's been using for streaming at the moment, but if you have a Stream Deck and things like that, then you can set up filters very easily on there. So you've got a one-button press or a shortcut that to filter out a particular note, and then you can still use all of your other shortcuts to move and everything else, but picking out notes from chords, that kind of thing, can be very useful. If you have a Stream Deck, it'll make it a bit quicker, or some other device that does shortcuts. It can also be useful, of course, for doing inversions and things. So if I put these back, if you're then moving those, the control up and down shortcuts for things, then you can move things around that way as well. When you're working on various things, and potentially with larger ensembles as well, there's a few ways you might want to look at how some of these things are mapped and work out. So if I go, for example, back to setup mode here, we can see we've got a whole bunch of instruments and we've got 3 flows. We've got a whole bunch of layouts here, so the full score contains everything, and the violin obviously only contains the violin player and is in all the flows, but you can set some of these in different ways. So it might be, for example, that one of our flows, maybe this first initial one, we only want to have the piano in. So I can say flow 1, actually I want to untick all of the other people. I don't need all of the other instruments that are in here. I just need the piano in it. It's just my little idea space. It might be that you don't need the extra violin at the top of this one, so you can just choose a flow, choose which instruments are going to be in it. Now, if you were to add a new full score at the bottom, then that full score would get all of the instruments and all of the flows in it, which might be what you want. But it might be that you just want to create a little layout just to focus your mind on the thing that you're working on right now. So if I just remove me from the picture for a minute, right at the bottom down here, this is where can create a new full score, and obviously a new part layout, but this next button is creating a custom score layout. So if I choose that one, now the custom score layout over here doesn't contain anything. So you can choose custom, in fact it's not even there yet because there's nothing to choose. So you can say, actually, I only want maybe flow 1, or I only want flow 3. The one I'm working on right now is the only one I want to see. Now, if you try and switch to it, you can't, because there's no players in it. So if you say, actually, what am I working on? Maybe I'm working on the piano and strings at the moment. So we can put them all into there, and now we've got something that we can actually select our custom score. So maybe if I double click this, maybe this is my working score. So that one will now be reflected in our list here. So now I've just got my working score. And again, I can go to Galley view if I just want to work on it in that way. So now it means if I scroll too far left, I don't see all of the other things. I'm not, I can focus my mind on this is exactly where I want it to be, and the instruments I want to work on. And there's a few other ways you can do this kind of thing as well. So if I go back to setup mode here, let's say we're adding some ensembles, and we've got 2-2-3-2, 4-4-3-2. So I've got 2 flutes, 2 oboes, clarinets, bassoons, horns, etc., etc. Press add. So I've added all of these extra instruments. Maybe I do now want to go back to, oops, no, not group, wrong button. Maybe I do now want to go back to orchestral order and put these in some sort of order. So I'm going to say, yep, go back to orchestral order. So now when I click on my button, then it will not, there we go. It will put them in the right order. So now, of course, the custom score I'm working on at the moment, which is my working score, doesn't contain all these extra instruments, but my full score does. So if I go back to my full score, I now have all of these extra instruments in all of my flows. Good, that's what I want. So now when you're working on this kind of thing, and also actually, while I think about it, note that when you're now in page view, you're going to get this, because Dorico says, well, you didn't have all of those to start off with. Now, because we started with that first initial, this was a piano piece when we first started, the paper's the wrong size and the staves are the wrong size. So I'm going to go into here and I'm going to say my paper size probably needs to be bigger, choose your own bigger paper, and my staff size probably needs to be smaller. You can press apply, you can leave this dialog open until you get it to the right size. You'll have noticed that when I was in Galley view, it didn't matter, because in Galley view it's going to spread all of these out for me anyway, so that I've got all the staves I want to work on, and I spread them all out equally. Now, if you only want to work on a few of these things, let's say actually, no, the thing that I'm working on, I now want to just work on the flute. I'm going to control select the first clarinet and the bassoon and horn 3 and the tubas, both. One of them, doesn't matter. And maybe also the piano part that I was looking at before. So I've command or control selected just those few instruments. And I'm going to press this little button here, which is a little plus. And this is our instrument filters. So I'll press this button and it's going to make me an instrument filter, and then it's going to turn that filter on. So I've just got those instruments that I'm working on. So now the advantage of this is that when I do things in this view, I'm only seeing these instruments. I'm hearing everything. So if I press play, you'd also get the strings in the background, so that in this view you're not seeing them, but you are still hearing them, which may be what you want. And this is our little filter. So here I can see, if I had any other filters, I can press plus. I can also edit the filters, so I can set up filters here. So there's a little button to set up all the presets for the instrument families if you want it, or you can say actually it's not first flute, I want its first oboe, or it's not bassoon 1, it's bassoon 2, or whatever you need. You can change your filters in here and update those, so you just get the instruments you wanted. So now I can write for oboe, for example, if I wanted to, but you can also use the option to separate out, to spread the caret over multiple staves. So if I use shift down, I can spread this over multiple staves. So now if I press my a 5-note chord, oh, pardon me. Then actually I pressed 6 notes, my mistake. So the tubas now have 2. But you see I've got 1 note for all of those instruments. And if I turn my instrument filter off, then of course you can see that would have been quite tricky to do in this view, because there's just so much going on. So if there's just a few instruments you're working on, but you still want to hear everybody else, that's a good option to use. If you're just working on some instruments and those are the only ones you want to hear, then that's where maybe this custom score that I was working on, just down here behind me, maybe that's where the custom score is useful, because now I won't be hearing everybody else. I'll only be hearing those instruments that are in that layout. But in my full score, with my instrument filters turned on, then there we go. Then I can hear everybody, and I can just work on those particular instruments. So I think that can be quite useful, just to try and focus things on, and stop the scrolling up and down quite so much, which is very useful. So we've looked at, all sorts of options here that hopefully would, be very useful when you're composing anything, when you're doing anything, and you just want to put some notes in, hear what's going on and everything else. A few other things that I'd kind of, also thought of that I don't think we've really mentioned very much, so I thought it was worth mentioning. So, for example, if I select some notes here, and I press Command 8 to show the key editor at the bottom. There is also a piano down here. Now, the piano can be used for note input, and actually, if you're using the iPad, you can use that with the record button. So there's a record button at the top of the iPad. You can select a staff, you can press the record button, and you can even use the on-screen keyboard if you want to, although really it's probably designed to attach a MIDI or a Bluetooth keyboard to your iPad and use it that way. But if you want to, you could use the on-screen keyboard. But the other thing the on-screen keyboard is useful, as well as note input, is telling you what's selected. So if I choose some notes here, you can see every time I make a selection, let's choose these chords over here, and if I extend this over a couple of bars, I can now see all of the notes that have been used in all of these chords, and obviously the ones that aren't as well. So actually, just sometimes from a quick analysis point of view, or which notes have been used or which notes haven't, actually sometimes that keyboard can be quite useful, and it works across multiple instruments. So if I select these notes here, across these multiple instruments with my instrument filter on, it's also showing me the notes and the chord that basically I played at that point, because those blue ones are the ones that are that I've been selected. So that can be quite useful. Another option is that you can use things like, let's come out of this one and have a quick. Let's use one of these. I knew there was a reason we hadn't deleted all of these. So let's say we've got some notes selected and we think we might like this, but it needs to be changed slightly. There's some transform tools here. So we have things like invert pitches, reverse pitches, rotating pitches, mapping to scale. So for example, you can pick a scale and say, if I started on a major, I now want to go to a natural minor, for example. And so you can do things like that, and that can be over one set of notes or chords or anything you like. So you can kind of, maybe you take a melody, maybe I've just pressed undo, you repeat it, and then you switch the repeated one and transform it in some other way. There's also rotate pitches and rhythms. So you can rotate the pitches or the rhythms along by one. Have a play with some of these and decide, which one's useful. Reverse pitches and rhythms. So now basically we've got the whole thing backwards. So we have the initial thing we did. It wasn't that good to start off with, but actually we could do something with that later. So there's those kind of options for kind of musical manipulations of retrograde and inversion and mapping things to a particular scale. It may be that if you're working with some students in a school and you've told them it needs to be in minor and they've not done that, you could, they can have written a melody and they can automatically map it to minor so that they know it's in, they know it's correct. It can also be useful with the keyboard at the bottom, because like I said, anything that's selected in here, you can then tell exactly which notes have been used. So if there was a set of notes, then they were only allowed to use those notes. They can check and see if they've done that as well, which might also be quite useful. We looked at some of the playback side of things. One thing I would also say is that if you've been adding and removing instruments, so if you've been writing something and you think, oh, I think I might want a cor anglais, oh, actually no, maybe I don't. Maybe I need some extra horns, and then actually I'm not going to use them, and then you go and add something else. What you can end up with in play mode is, in the VST rack, is more things loaded in here than you actually need. Because what Dorico will do by default in Halion and also in Note Performer and other things, it will load in and keep loading the number of slots you need. But if you remove an instrument, it's not going to remove that from this slot. So what you also might want to do is just go to Play and Playback template and reapply whichever playback template you're using. Note Performer, HSO, BBCSO, VSL, whatever. Because if you reapply it, Dorico will take all of those instruments and samples away, and it will reload only the ones that are in use in the project at that moment in time. So that can be quite useful, just from a system resources point of view, can be quite useful. Just be aware, though, that if you have gone in and made any tweaks yourself to Halion or anything else to load in specific samples, then those will be lost at that point, and maybe that's the point you want to maybe look at making your own playback template. That's a whole different topic. But sometimes from a resources point of view, that can be quite useful. Also, if you're moving between different devices, if you started a composition on one computer with one sample library and you move it to another one, then you might want to apply a different playback template that has the libraries that are on that computer at the time. So that also might be quite useful. There was something else which just and left again. Oh yes. We talked about flows and that kind of thing when you can make duplicates of them. But it might be that you were on holiday and you wrote a little something on the iPad. You can then, because of the cloud sharing option now, of course, it will appear in your iCloud, Dropbox, whatever system you're using for that. So then what you might want to do is say, I now want to use that little idea I had on holiday in this piece. So now if you go to File, Import, and Flows, you can then choose your Dorico file, and you can import it into here, and you'll get that as a new flow. And you can then decide to copy and paste it, or set the order of the flows, or anything else. You can also use it for collaborating with other people, or if you're working on a project and you think, I've got this little idea, but actually it doesn't fit this project, you can also export a flow. So you can export that as a little idea that maybe you want to use in future for something else. Let me just have a look at some of the comments and questions down here. I'm interested to see if there's anything about composition ideas people have had, or ways that you use Dorico and that kind of thing. And also, is there anything else in a this kind of session I think will be useful? So, will there be a scanning feature for photo or PDF? Oh, not quite today's topic, I suppose, unless that's your source of inspiration. There are lots of scanning applications you can use already. So if you already have one, try that one. If you don't have one, try something like PlayScore 2. It's on an iPhone, it's on Android. You can just take a picture of some music and then send a music XML file. Dorico will import music XML files from Photoscore and Smart. They all have the word score in them, don't they? So any of the scanning applications, Dorico will import those as music XML files. Use those for inspiration if you like. And how do you record live on the iPad? Oh, as I said, there's a record button at the top, a little red record button. So choose a staff, hit the record button, and there you go. Oh yes, and that was when I didn't turn the screen on. Apologies. Another vote for modernism and avant-garde. Not quite in today's session, but okay. You'll be able to come back and watch this later. You will indeed. This will be available now, and I will also put time chapter markers underneath, so you'll be able to skip through it. And Tim Willingham, thank you. Yep, you answered the question. I should check to make sure the questions haven't been answered. And Frank, thank you very much. Insert mode, yes. Philip, if insert mode can be useful for all sorts of things. It's called insert mode. It should be called something like playing with time mode, or I don't know, something, but that doesn't really track as a marketing term. But have a look at, give it a try and have a look at some of the videos for some of the ideas for things to do with insert mode. It's very, very useful for making things very flexible and changing your mind. Can you change the voice of the piano sound at certain measures? I suppose that depends on the samples you're using. It's more common to maybe switch the instrument. So think like a real performer. If they're playing piano and you want them to switch to a Rhodes, what you'd actually do is here, you would find the player, you click the little plus, and you would give them a different instrument. And so that Dorico then assigns two instruments to that player, and you can switch between them. In Galley view, Dorico would sort out the options between them. So, for example, piano and Hammond organ, something like that. You could give them both to the same player, and their part would be automatically done as well. But you would, in Galley view, you will see all of the instruments. So you would see both piano and organ, and you can just write for whichever one you need accordingly. There is, I suppose, the option of, depending on the sample you're using, you could input a key switch, a program change to get the sample to change. Depends, maybe, I'm not sure if that's what you're looking for, but you could do that too. How to avoid auto slur when I'm playing live recording? There is an option. So if you have a look in the preferences, Dorico preferences, or edit preferences on PC, when you're doing note input and editing, there's various options in here as to what you want to do. One of the ones I forgot as well is in here, so I will show that one in a minute. So if there's various options for things that you might want to do in here, and and what's going on when you're inputting. But in the play section, you'll also find, as well as your MIDI devices and your basic quantize options, there's also things like whether or not Dorico will detect slurs, tremolos, and trills when you're playing. So if you don't want it to detect slurs, untick that little box, and it won't. Sketching. Yes, that was something else I was going to show. So let's start a quick new blank project, because one other way you might start is actually not with all of these players, I guess. If you're thinking a bit more like, I just want a string staff. When you go to add your players here, if I just add a single player, there are some sketch instruments. So for example, I could have a sketch brass woodwind string staff. So let's say woodwind this time. So now I just have a grand staff for just woodwinds, and I can do the same for brass. So this kind of thing. So if you want to just start with this way, then maybe one of your flows could start this way. So when I enter notes in here, then you will only get, once the samples are loaded, you'll only get the brass samples from here, and Dorico will assign those automatically. So it might be that you want to start that way. So there are some sketch instruments if you want to do it. Maybe somebody mentioned an 8-stave setup and that kind of thing. Yes, you could start that way as well. Although, you know, is it just as quick sometimes now in Dorico to say, you know, to do, you know, to put the chord in here, or to say actually what I wanted was, you know, an ensemble of some woodwinds. So let's say woodwind, yeah, single woodwinds. And in the same way as I played the chord here, if I extend the caret here and play the same chord, then I get the, you know, the same result. Oh, different chord. Play the same chord, he says, not playing the same chord. You know, so it depends, you know, how you like working. No, hopefully. There was something else. Oh yes, note input. So another way actually that I quite like working these days, and I didn't think I would, is that I'm from the Sibelius, old school Sibelius way of doing things, which is I have a pitch chosen, so I have a rhythm chosen, and then I choose a pitch on a MIDI keyboard, and it enters that. But if I'm not sure exactly what I want, then I press K, and it switches it into basically finale mode, which is it doing pitch before duration. So now I can play notes on my MIDI keyboard, and you see I get grey notes for everything I press until I get the thing I wanted. And then when I press a note duration, then I get that inputted instead. So sometimes K for me is a useful toggle it on when I want it, and then most of the time I don't have that on, and when I press K, then I can play around, you know, on my keyboard with some chords and then decide the thing I wanted. So that's a useful option for me. If you're like working the other way around, then in your note input and editing you can specify that you switch them around the other way, so that specify pitch before duration or after duration, and you can choose which way around you want it. But K will toggle the other way around, which can be actually quite useful when you're just kind of, I don't know quite what the voicing is, or I don't know quite what the chord is that matches. Yes, that's it. You know, it can be a useful way without having to keep, you know, turning off or undoing the thing that you were doing in there. Let me go back to the comments. Hang on a second. Note Performer isn't compatible with Dorico 4. Yes, it is. I don't know. Not quite sure where you've got that from, but yes, it's fine. Note Performer will work with, I think, any version of Dorico now. So yes, version 4, no problem. You can also, if you really want to, you can install Dorico 4. There is a sale on for 24 hours now, and then you can go back to using 3.5. But you won't need to for Note Performer. It's fine. I just, you know, go to Play and go to Playback template and choose Note Performer, and then Note Performer will load in the VST rack instead. Actually, if anybody wants it on the forum now, there's because what Note Performer does is it loads one Note Performer instance and puts all of the instruments in it, but that means that the mixer, when it comes back, Note Performer just sends back basically a stereo pair, or, you know, a channel for each player, which isn't what everybody wants. What some people want is to use their own reverb and to get Note Performer to come back with one channel for every instrument. So there is now a new little new playback template for that if you want it. If you have a look in the forum, I think I've even got it here somewhere. Yes, here we go. So single instrument option. So now it will. I didn't test this one. There we go. So now I've got, with Note Performer, one staff. Now you're gonna have to add your own reverb and do more manual work now. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for everybody. But if that's, you know, if that's what you really want, then that's also available. Have a look on our forum, dorico.com/forum. But yes, no problem with Note Performer. There was, yeah, Jeff, good point. If you're on a Silicon Mac, you do need to run Dorico 4 in Rosetta mode to use Note Performer, but yeah. Let me just check. Yes, Note Performer fine on a PC as well. Talking about sketching, yes. If you've got some real world examples of this is how I work, this is my workflow for composing, I'd really love to hear about it. Email me on discoverdorico@steinberg.de. If you've got some useful hints and tips for other people, that'd be great. Put them in the comments as well underneath the video, but I'd love to know what some other people's ideas are. Extend to next note, very useful, yes, for fixing MIDI imports. Let me just have a look. Don't. Oh, when. Yeah, manually resetting all playback overrides every time after record. If you don't want some of the other MIDI information, if you have a look in the preferences, there are some filters that you can say don't record my CC data and that kind of thing. So yes, you can turn some of those off if you're getting more information than you actually wanted. Yes, that might be useful. Keep going. Somebody also has the same keyboard. The little keyboard, MIDI keyboard, was a CME X key. Other ones are available. They also do a Bluetooth one. It's a fair bit more expensive, but pick a keyboard that works for you. Actually, I tend to have a keyboard in front of me which is a Yamaha Reface because it's got sounds on it, which can be sometimes just useful when I'm noodling on something, restarting the computer and noodling on something. But it has MIDI keys, which for me is okay. I don't mind the MIDI keys. They feel nice to play, but it means the keyboard's slightly shorter and it's only 3 octaves. Some people prefer a larger keyboard. I also have a larger keyboard, so choose whatever size MIDI keyboard, but really it does make things quicker on for entering notes and various other things in Dorico. Let's have a look. I don't think there's any other questions. How to hide empty bars in a full score? You could delete them. I think somebody then said how you can trim them. Yes, how to remove them. So you can trim flow. So if you've got empty bars at the end, let's say, oh no, wrong piece. Let's go back to this one. I haven't saved either of these. Fortunately, Dorico will have done it for me. So let's say in this one here, I've only written 8 bars. So in write mode, if I choose, it doesn't matter, and press Shift B and say trim, then it will trim off. So that was Shift B for bars and type the word trim, and it will remove any of those extra bars. There's a few other ways you can do it as well, but that's a good one. There's also things like if you want to remove things in the middle, sometimes people like to use the system track. So Alt T, or if you go to View System Track, you can turn on the system track, which is up here. So you can choose these bars, for example, and you can also press the little bin. And you can remove bars that way. You can also add bars that way. When you're up here, if you hold down Alt, you can see the individual beats, and you can choose and drag and select individual beats, and you can add or remove beats from that one, as various other ways. But for just the end of a piece, Shift B, type trim, it'll trim those for you automatically. Transpose to any key. I didn't show you transpose. If you've written something in a key, here's some notes I wrote. And if you go to write and transpose, then you can choose a different one. My favorite is to use the calculate interval here. So if we're presuming I'm in C and I want to go into F, then you can calculate an interval here, and that will set everything for you over here. So you press apply, it sets everything over here, you press OK, and it will automatically transpose it. So that's a favourite one I use. Also available on the iPad if you want to use it on the iPad. In fact, most of the things we've done today, the instrument filters are available on the iPad. It's all very similar. So I haven't shown you kind of specific iPad composition things. If you're on holiday with your iPad, it basically works the same way. So it should be good. If you put chord symbols over a section, you transpose it. Hang on. Pressing undo. So let's say this one here. Now, there's a few ways you can do this. Of course, I could select these, right-click, chord symbols, generate chord symbols. Oops, the dialogue's appeared on a different window. So if I want the chord symbols, I can put the chord symbols in, Nice. I could also just press Shift Q and I could play the chord on my keyboard. I didn't play the bass note this time, that's why I got a different one. So I can play the chord that way. And now if I choose these, and then I go to Edit, Write, Transpose. What did I do with fourth? I'll do a different one this time. This does not transpose. If you've selected these chord symbols as well, and you go Transpose and you go to something else, then they will transpose. So the answer is, of course, make sure they're selected. And if you've got multiple chord symbols, just copy the chord symbol for a second. If you've got multiple chord symbols, of course, when you do this selection, then make sure if I shift select this and do this, you might want to include the chord symbols. Things like select more, because I've got a chord symbol selected. If I choose the chord symbol and all of these notes, I have to do it properly, and press select more, which is Command Shift A, then it will select more of the same items, which would include chord symbols if you wanted it to. Interestingly, it didn't there, probably because it wasn't on a note. So yeah, things like chord symbols, select more will often help you if you want to transpose the chord symbols, and whether you have the notes selected. So the important thing is the transpose menu, the transpose option, will apply to the things you have selected. So it didn't select these notes, so they didn't transpose. So it may be that you just want to do select all, and then the chords and the notes are selected, and then they'll do the transpose. Hopefully that helps. Hang on, let me check where they get to on the questions. Should we set up exactly... Oh, sorry, I've lost it. Should we set up exactly how many bars of each flow first to avoid structure changing problems of adding more bars? No, you can add bars, remove bars as you like. The default, I think, is 32 bars, but you can change it either in the hub when you first start, or you can add more bars later. It really doesn't matter how many bars. The instruments, I guess, adding the more instruments, you might want to have a think about the paper size, but it's easy to change the paper size later if you add more instruments. So it's not really a problem. Frank's mentioned the manual staff visibility, and of course there's the hide empty staves and layout options as well. Hit that like button. Oh, well, please do, but I didn't write that, somebody else did. I like to have a loop play function. Yeah, we don't really have a loop play. I've never really used it that much, but yes, okay. I mean, I suppose if I've ever wanted that, I'd play through a section, and because I can just hit the replay from that same position again, shift spacebar, then I can hear it again anyway. And I've never needed it to be exactly in time and keep going that way. But yes, I can understand that. Maybe we will add that at some point. The other option, of course, is to add repeat markers. If you add a repeat bar line, then it will repeat that. So if I do Shift B and add a repeat bar line here and do the same and add one, add one here, then it would repeat just for a bit. I can delete these later when I don't want it to repeat that bit. I know that's not quite as easy as a loop function, but it might help you in the meantime. Can you live record into multiple staves? No, you can't at the moment, actually. But you can use the explode later. Yeah, maybe one day. Step time you can, as I've shown, but yeah, not that one. Did I mean the Dorico blog for the Note Performer templates? No, I think it's actually on the forum, the new Note Performer template. I think if you have a look in the forum, it's in there. I should add it to the blog, but I don't think I've done it yet. The resources page. I'll try and get onto that, but I think at the moment it's just in the forum. Also, watch out. If you use that Note Performer template so that you get individual instruments in the mixer, because there's no reverb, it's reset all the reverbs. However, if you then go back to the normal Note Performer template, you still have no reverb. So you then have to go in, let me just show you. You then have to go back to, I'm not using it in this one. Where was I using it? This one? Yes. So if you're using this one, you then have to press the little E and you have to turn up the reverb, even if you've reset things, because the reverb will be on 0 and Note Performer doesn't sound as good. So just be aware of that if you use that extra playback template. There's some votes for Native Instruments Complete Control M32 keyboards. Yeah, other MIDI keyboards are available. And let's have a look. Any other question? A double bar line to be shown at the end of a system when there's a repeat starting in the next system. Oh, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. So if you've got some bars here, and here you've put in a repeat bar line, and you've got this one here, I think. Yes, that should, I think it's the default now. But if not, have a look in the, no, where did we put it? Isn't the bar, no, it'd be in the repeat section, I think. No, here we go. No, bar lines, yeah, this one here. So this is in engraving options, bar lines. You might get this by default. So you get a single bar line normally and a double bar line here. But this is the option. Maybe I've set that as my default. I like that option too. So if you like this option, choose it and then do save as default. You get it in all of your other projects that you start on that computer. How do we get Dorico shirts? We don't actually do them, so I'm not sure. I could tell you where we get them from, I suppose. But no, there aren't really many of these available. I do have some other Dorico t-shirts. If you find us at a trade show or an event, then we do have some other more time for music shirts, but yeah, not these ones. Is there any other questions? Importing map files? Well, you can import MIDI files to start off with, but you can also import tempo tracks. So if that's what you mean by the map, I'm not entirely sure, then you could import just the tempo track from a MIDI file if that would be useful. And yeah, multiple repeats. Only the multiple repeats playback is only if you set them up and say it's a third time repeat or a fourth time repeat or that kind of thing. So when you set up a repeat down here, you can say how many times, play n times, how many times it will repeat for. Normally that's in conjunction with a second or third time repeat bar line as well, but yes, you can set them to play out multiple times in there. I can't answer the question about the printer. It may be email me, I'm not sure. That sounds like you want something in a particular area. I'm not sure I can help you with that one, I'm afraid. How to let Dorico avoid any harmony mistakes. Define mistake. Maybe it's an intentional harmony. And can you draw freely in a project? Not sure for what you mean by draw freely. On the iPad, you can annotate things. We don't have a pencil tool or that kind of thing to kind of draw lines and that kind of thing. We've got some ideas for those. There are lines tools and that kind of thing that you can use over here. You can also make various symbols into playing techniques if they don't exist already. And there are some wiggly line options and all sorts of things that do already exist. But we don't have a kind of a freehand, I want to just draw from here to here with a freehand thing yet. Maybe one day, but we don't have that yet. A key command for the selector arrow. So I mean, often if you just click on a white space, then you can stop selecting things. And pressing escape will turn off the caret line, and also pressing enter will turn off the caret line. If you had something selected, then often, like I said, you can just click somewhere else. But this selector arrow here, is that the why was it not on? Because you'd had that, maybe? I think there was. Maybe there was a shortcut for it. I can't remember. Apologies. Yes, yeah, a pencil tool, but the problem is we would quite like that to do something useful. So you don't just want to draw a line, you want the line to mean something. So we would like to attach it to either some sort of playback or various other things. So it's a bit more complicated. You also want it to be a vector image so that if the score moves and changes, that the line also changes. So you might need to define some points along it and that kind of thing. It's a big topic, so maybe one day. Tips for composition with percussion. I think various things here would probably still apply. However, I'd be quite interested to know from you what kind of things you would like to know. Maybe there's another one of these sessions we should do on kind of specific things for percussion and things that you'd want to know, adding new techniques, or defining those kind of things, or once they're all set up, how you alternate between them, or anything else. Are you using a MIDI keyboard? So do you want to kind of input things from a MIDI keyboard and map those to particular techniques in the percussion? Let me know what you'd like on that. Let's maybe look at another option. Harmony mistakes can mean parallel fifths and octaves. Well, it can to some people, I suppose. We don't have a check parallel fifths and octaves, maybe one day, but we don't have one yet. There are things, some of the analysis things that might be useful. Some of the filter options can be quite useful to kind of filter out specific notes and say, is there a specific pitch here, and color it. You can do those kind of things, but there isn't an automatic check option for those, at least at the moment. Let me have a look. Yes, Theo. Yeah, if you've got things that you would quite like to be added to Dorico, then please go to our forum, dorico.com/forum, and suggest things on there. That's where our developers will read things and decide, actually, yeah, that's a good idea. We'd like that, or not, or they might ask you further questions about it and that kind of thing. So dorico.com/forum for any suggestions. And Frank's got a good point. Yes, the lines, if you're freehand drawing lines, also has to behave properly in the parts, not just in the score. And it might be that you want it just in some bits of the score and not in all the parts, or you do want it in all the parts, or anyway, can be complicated. Show the voice range, e.g. soprano and alto. Yes, that will happen automatically. In fact, he's showing me here for the flute at the moment that you've got some red notes here for the flute. So the instrument ranges, yes, they will be shown as well. Yeah, and I don't think I've got to the bottom of the questions. So thank you for all those people who've asked questions live. Like I said, this session will now be available to watch again. So I will put some little chapter markers at the bottom so you can flick through this if there's anything you think would be useful as a recap, or to send to somebody else and say this one might be a useful session for you for composing. Try not using manuscript paper. Let me know how you get on. I think there's a lot more flexible options that you can do in Dorico for those type of things. A lot of things that you can say actually would really speed things up, because then it's a bit like handwriting something with a pen. You like the idea, but then you give it to somebody else and they go, I can't read your handwriting. If you've got it in the program, it's much more flexible to be able to obviously back things up and change things later, and extend things in different directions, and in some cases get the computer to do some of those composition tasks that would take you a while. So yeah, I'd be very interested to know how you get on with those kind of things, and if you like it. Like I said at the beginning, there's about 24 hours-ish left of the summer sale. So if you want to save 30% and you haven't either upgraded Dorico or you haven't yet bought Dorico, then head over to the Steinberg website or to dorico.com. And when in the summer sale, you'll find Dorico's in there with 30% off until the 28th of July. And if you're looking for another video right now, looking for something maybe a little bit different, my colleague Dom has just done a video on Cubase in 14 minutes, which is really useful, quick kind of guide to if you haven't used Cubase for a long time and you want to know where things are, or you're thinking, actually, would that be a useful way of doing things? Maybe you're then importing it into Dorico for notation. Maybe right now the notation isn't the important part of your composition process. I prefer to write things in notation and see things in notation and work that way. If you're thinking sometimes actually, or I just like it as an extra tool, have a look at that. I'll link it underneath this video as well. So there's a video that Dom's done on Cubase in 14 minutes. So let's have a look. There's a couple of other questions just come in, so I'll answer these. I've missed one, sorry. Let me just scroll up. Microtonal writing an iPad? No, at the moment on the iPad, that's one of the limitations for what you can do on there. You can obviously do it on the desktop version, and I've done other sessions on microtonal music on the iPad. I think actually if you start a project on a desktop version that uses a microtonal tuning, you can then use it on the iPad, but you can't create them on the iPad. that might help you. Can we only show seconds with no time? Not quite sure what you mean. Let me know what you mean. Maybe email me on that one. Discover Dorico at steinberg.de, and I'll try and answer that question for you. I'm afraid I'm not sure what the answer is about cardstock printer. Is it a phrase or something I don't use? Maybe somebody else can help in the comments, or again, email me and I'll find out an answer for you. Do I plan any live streams on print layout like magazine method, worksheet between text, different staff, etc.? We've done some on some layout options, but if you have some examples of how would you make this, send me a PDF or something, an image of how do you make this in Dorico. That kind of thing would be very useful to kind of look at, and doing another session that's, and real world case of this is what I want to make, how do I do it? I'd love to know. So email me any examples on discoverdorico at steinberg.de, and let's look at those. And a question from Ilya about writing for SATB and TDBB in parallel. I'm not quite sure what you mean. Maybe email me, Ilya, and I'll have a look at that. I'm not quite sure what you mean on that one. So yeah, email me on that one. So thank you very much for joining us all live. Like I said, go and watch Dom's Cubase in 14 minutes on the Steinberg channel, and I'll link to it from below because I think that one is also quite useful for people just to kind of over the summer have a look at some other software. Of course, you can get the Cubase trial now as well without needing a USB dongle. And yes, thank you for joining. Enjoy your holidays, and if you come up with any great compositions, especially because of this session, I'd also like to know. So thank you for joining us live, and until the next time, see you later.